got for the day, but we're kicking it off strong with the afternoon. Bob Jesse has been one of the quiet architects of this modern psychedelic renaissance. Through the Council on Spiritual Practices, he's helped bring attention to psychedelics as tools for spiritual growth and the betterment of the well people, not just medicines. He was instrumental in forming and guiding the Johns Hopkins psilocybin research team, co-authoring its landmark 2006 mystical experience study, and helps keep alive a broader vision for psychedelics outside of the medical model. So please welcome Bob Jesse.
Check, check. Good. Thank you for the kind introduction. I want to start by saying that I came in last night in time to see some of the demos and got a rapid-fire view of the incredible brain trust that is gathered here. So it's going to be really fun and an honor to get to speak with you for a little while. So the title of this talk is Psychedelics Outside of the Medical Model. And I'm going to say a bit about what I mean by that, and then also tell you a story about why that became of prime interest to me. Let's start with a show of hands. Raising your hand to any question is totally optional. Do not make a self-disclosure you're not comfortable making a disclosure about. Who here has taken a psychedelic specifically to treat a psychiatrically diagnosed condition like depression, OCD, anxiety, PTSD, and so on? Okay, we've got about 3, thank you. Who here has taken a psychedelic for no explicit reason about treating a diagnosed mental health condition? Okay. So notice I'm playing with words. I'm trying to make a clear line between medical or psychiatric and non-medical. That is actually a falsehood. If you go to your primary care doc who says, you're in pretty good shape. By the way, it'd be really good for you to get some more exercise. And then you independently decide to start running a couple times a week. Is that running a medical intervention? I see head shaking, no. But it serves a medical function. It makes you healthier. So this divide between medical and non-medical, I'm using it without fully believing in it and knowing that there are gray areas. It's fuzzy. One way to clarify it is to say, does insurance pay for it? My visit to my doctor, probably. Buying my running shoes, probably not. Okay. I'm deeply interested in the lesser medicalized part of that fuzzy division. And I stand in a long lineage of people with that interest, including indigenous populations about which I know very little, and therefore I don't say very much. But let me read you here 2 things. One is from the famous, infamous Timothy Leary, who wrote in a 1960 letter, "The purpose of our research was to determine the conditions under which psilocybin can be used to broaden and deepen human experience." So there can be a medical implication there, but there's something way more than the medical model usually incorporates. Years later, my friend and mentor and teacher Ann Shulgin wrote, "I believed then and still believe that visionary plants and chemicals compounds are spiritual tools whose highest and best use is in opening one's psyche and increasing insight." Now the personal story. I had moved to the Bay Area, California, we're getting a little ring here. Got it? We'll call it the beginning of 1990. When you move to California with an interest in psychedelics, it's not hard to meet more people interested in them, including people who've worked in the field for many years, in some cases many decades. So it was on account of meeting some of the old pioneers who were either forced underground or just forced into a non-psychedelic career track. Met a number of them, and I think it was the beginning of 1993. I found myself as one of about 20 people seated on the floor of what is called the Big House at California's Esalen Institute. This was a small invitational gathering put on by a person who's become a very close friend to gather people with a serious professional interest in psychedelics, which did not describe me. My training is in engineering and computer science, and at the time I was working for Oracle Corporation. And it's a quirk of fate that I ended up in the room. But after very brief introductions, and Howard said a bit about Esalen, we took our time that first evening going around the room where each person would describe who they are, why they're there, and what their vision is. And some typical answers would be like, well, I'm a neuroscientist, deeply interested in the brain, and we have some tools to study the operation of the brain, but not all that many, and psychedelics could be a great probe to help us understand better what's going on up here. Next person. I'm Sally Smith, made-up name. I'm a psychologist, clinical psychologist, and I deal with people all the time who are suffering. My training allows me to help them sometimes a lot, and sometimes not so much. And there's reason to believe, I've read it from decades ago, frankly, I might have had some experience myself, to believe that these tools could help me as a clinical psychologist help alleviate suffering much more. Next person. Hi, I'm Bill Jones. I'm a psychiatrist. I work with people all the time with very, very severe mental health conditions. And we've got this drug and that drug and a little bit of talk therapy. Sometimes it helps, sometimes a lot, most often not so much. I believe these materials could really, really help. Somebody else says, I'm really interested in brain structure-activity relationships. And psychedelics are a great way to understand the actual mechanics of the brain. Two others are on the circle. Hi, I'm Bob. I work at Oracle Corporation. I'm an engineer. All of those things that bring you here seem fantastic to me, and they are not why I am here. I'm here because I and a great number of my friends have had psychedelic experiences that we value for different reasons, or at least consonant reasons, if they're not totally different. Many of us would say our eyes have been opened to our own consciousness, to the possibility that our own consciousness is broader and larger and more pervasive than we ordinarily think or have been taught to think. They have been intensely enjoyable, sometimes intensely challenging. Bonding experiences between friends in a friend circle, and occasionally have shifted for some of us our entire worldview. Why aren't people talking about this? And if we focus only on the medical model, believing that only FDA approval will get any of these materials destigmatized and made at least partly legal again, well, that's not very meaningful for people with my background. I might have even joked something like, when can somebody call 1-800-psychedelics and have access to 5 minutes of coaching and a legal supply of high-quality material? That generated some nervous laughter in the room. Like maybe some other people were thinking that but felt they could not say it. But I had nothing else to say. I'm going to give you an example of what medicalization looks like. There's a very excellent book, easy to find on the used book market, called The Use of LSD in Psychotherapy and Alcoholism. It's a tome. It's about almost 700 pages. And each chapter is written by a different person who attended a conference about 2 years prior. I'm going to read you many, many chapters, but I'll just read a few of them. The use of LSD-25 and Ritalin in the treatment of neuroses. The use of LSD-25 in personality diagnostics and therapy of psychogenic disorders. LSD-25 and mescaline as therapeutic adjuvants. On the action mechanisms of LSD-25. Psychotherapy with LSD, pro and con. And the one paper in here that touched on the personal, epistemic, spiritual, religious, the famous Walter Pankey, even then medicalized it with the following title: The Contribution of the Psychology of Religion in the Therapeutic Use of Psychedelic Substances. Now, I don't think he actually believed that that's how limited the story is, but he framed the religious, the spiritual, the mystical in terms of how it can help psychiatry. I didn't go to that meeting thinking I would ever leave Oracle, or at least the tech industry. But the message in the room was so pervasive. Medicine, psychiatry, psychology, clinical use, trained clinicians, patients. And I'm thinking, if this is what emerges in the psychedelic renaissance, later called the psychedelic, I prefer reemergence, but whatever. It's clear that things are going to move. The promise here is too great. And if all that happens is medicalization, many of us will feel, I felt left out. I felt like what's happening in this room does not speak to my experience, and I know that I'm not alone. I took a year's leave of absence, which turned into a permanent absence from Oracle, gathered some of the people that I met in the Bay Area to say, how can we change this? As an engineer or computer scientist, I can't do this by myself. So after many lunches, dinners, weekend meetings, a group of us came together under the name the Council on Spiritual Practices. And these are some of the key figures. I'm not going to take a lot of time to go into who they are, but Houston Smith, Brother David Stendelrast, the Reverend Dr. Kenneth B. Williams, Ann Shulgin, Willis Harmon, Myron Stolaroff, and quite a few others. These are people whose credentials, any one of them, exceeded mine in this field, and together became a real power group. One outcome within a few years of this was the resumption of psychedelic research at my alma mater, Johns Hopkins. And I won't say exactly what happened, but I will say that our little group, you just saw some of them, effectively catalyzed the formation of the psilocybin research team at Johns Hopkins. And we did so with the firm conviction that if Hopkins would let us do it, if the FDA would allow it, if the DEA would allow it, the first study must not be a treatment protocol. It must not involve patients seeking treatment. We want to do it with, as they say in the field, healthy normals, and measure the effects of psilocybin, high dose, very high dose psilocybin, looking for harms or difficulty, including disrupted sleep, disrupted mood afterwards, but also looking for the positive things that could happen. Change in moral view, change in overall mood, change in sociability, change in the amount of attention available for others and for self. Here's the first paper that emerged. By the way, almost to the week, this is the 20th anniversary of the publication of that paper. Thank you for that, but the world has already applauded. If you believe Google, this paper has been cited on the order of 2,700 times, which makes it a very high impact paper. Between that and several follow-on studies from Johns Hopkins, I think it is now impossible for somebody aware of the literature to believe that the medical model is the only place where the action is. I'm going to show you a bit of the science in that paper. The first three charts there show that there's a systematic time course, a matching time course between the drug, heart rate, intensity of drug action, and so on. The next chart says there are two separable phenomena going on here. One is just like the overall intensity of the drug experience. In the alcohol realm, it would be, do I feel anything at all, a little tipsy, really kind of sloshy, or almost passing out? That would be intensity of ethanol drug effect. That is almost unrelated. It is related, but not strongly related to the occurrence of what the scientific literature calls mystical experience. Mystical in that context has a much narrower definition than you might think. And if there were more time, and there might be later on, we'll see, I will give you a glimpse of what the literature means by mystical. The short form would mean like ego dissolution, non-duality. It does not mean I'm at a seance and the table rises. Oh, that's so mystical. So the vernacular meaning of mystical is far broader than in the scientific work. We asked two things of volunteers in this 2006 study. How personally meaningful is the experience? And I'm not going to take the time to fully decode this chart, but fully 2/3 of the people placed it among the top 5 most meaningful experiences of their entire lives. A little less than 1/3 said it was the single most. These were not sheltered people, median age 42, and generally pretty well educated. A lot of life experience under the belt. And for about 1/3 of them, this they said, and verified 14 months later, that was the most meaningful experience of my entire life. If you change the question to say, how spiritually significant was the experience for you? The numbers go up even a little bit more, which calls into question, what does the word spiritual mean? We didn't tell them. We allowed them to use the word spiritual according to their own understanding of the word. Nomenclature. Both Hopkins and the Imperial Research Team have developed validated scales of what they call psychological insight, which is simply it's just what it says it is, discovering something new and salient, important, and useful about yourself you didn't know before. Then there's a religious experience, spiritual or sacred, and mystical. I'm going to guess that a lot of people in the room are uncomfortable with the word religious. Raise your hand if there's any discomfort around that word. Fewer than I would have expected. One or two kind of maybes. For a lot of people, religion is basically a synonym for religion with very importantly undesirable characteristics. Religion is a synonym for misogynistic religion. Religion is a synonym for intolerant religion. Religion is a synonym for punishing religion. And I want to say, if that's what you're thinking, use a term like punishing religion and not the word religion, because there are plenty of examples of religions and religious communities in the world that don't have those, I'll say, pathological elements to them. Enough on that in the interest of time. Among the, at this point, quite a number of studies my colleagues and I at Hopkins have done, we did a survey study broken into two parts. This was a survey study of so-called God encounter experiences, and we used a number of synonyms: God encounter, encountering ultimate reality, encountering the ground of being, whatever word makes most sense to you. Comparing one group who had those experiences with no drug at all, through meditation, seemingly randomly walking down the street, childbirth, whatever. And the other group were people who reported those intense experiences having taken one of psilocybin, LSD, ayahuasca, or DMT by itself. There's a chart in there saying what is similarity between the non-drug and the psychedelic groups and what is dissimilar. I'm just going to point out one to them that was common between those two groups. More than 2/3 of those who identified as atheist before the experience no longer identified as atheist afterwards. I'm getting chills when I think about that. Now, not identifying as atheist leaves open a lot of possibilities. It doesn't mean you are a theist or a multi-theist, or there's all these words these days that are hard to differentiate, but panpsychism, pantheism, word soup. There's lots of ways to slice the pie about whether you believe consciousness preceded matter, or co-arose with matter, or is infused in all of matter or only some of matter, whether that consciousness is petitionable, can you pray to it and ask for something? But to move from atheist to something different seems astonishing to me. Around this, there has arisen in the field questions about what are sometimes called epistemic risk and epistemic harm. And somebody who's asserting that somebody made a shift from atheism to something else, and they're convinced that atheism is the correct model for the world, they're going to say that person was harmed. They were made to believe something that the assessor believes to be false. The risk is you might have your worldview changed into a way that is not correct. And the harm is if it did get changed and the person judging you thinks it was not correct. Well, there's a counterpoint to this. The term has arisen, it's not my coinage, epistemic injustice. What if you're a person whose worldview has been changed, either through non-drug or through psychedelic means? You're very happy where you landed, and somebody else tells you that that transition was wrong. I'm going to call that an injustice. Let's look at some non-medical contexts of use. This is a depiction of a North American Native American church tradition teepee meeting, typically held all night, and in a teepee like this one. I say Native American church tradition because the Native American church isn't one thing. It really is a tradition and not a single hierarchical organization. But it's very well established. The church meetings are very intense and have proven over many decades to be beneficial to Native Americans who participate in them, including in the substantial reduction of alcohol use. There is a South American tradition. Notice the green and the white, different setting, but there are some things about it that feel pretty similar to the Native American church ceremony. These are structured, they are supervised, they start at a certain time, they end at a certain time. A bit more about nomenclature. What do you think of when you hear the phrase recreational drug use? So the culture at large says, oh, in that context, recreational is a synonym for haphazard, unwise, harmful, and not to be condoned. Only in the context of psychedelic or other drug use do we think that about the word recreational. Our tax dollars go to pay for departments of parks and recreation. Who thinks ill about recreational rock climbing if you're reasonably well trained, if you're with a climbing buddy, if you've got good equipment? Yes, it's risky. And still we think that is generally a good thing. We trust adults to make wise decisions, understanding that not everyone will, and we can't control behavior all that much. So I'm buying back the word recreation and recreational. There's a panel later on called harm reduction, and I'm going to take a risk here and say I really don't like that term. And yet it's used time and time and time again. It came from, my understanding, is early in the HIV/AIDS crisis, and there were clinics both in the UK and the US where the only available treatment modality was for counselors to treat people who use drugs as though abstinence is the only thing you can do. In some cases, you could be fired from your job if you counseled anything other than abstinence. And the health authorities, first in the UK, finally got it, that it's more important to control an epidemic than it is to stop people from using drugs. So we are going to allow the teaching of how to have less harm. And they came across a term that made that politically viable. They called it harm reduction. I'm going to say viability. I have no idea their intention, but the viability of the term was because it subtly buys into the idea that all drug use is harmful and the best you can do is have less harm. If you're a public health person trained to think of incidence of harm per 100,000, then that's a good frame because you're thinking of harm at a population level. At the individual level, everybody here knows that most ingestions of a psychedelic cause no harm at all. So there's no harm to reduce. But any use of a non-trivial amount of psychedelic is not risk-free. Therefore, you can always reduce the risk. I can think of virtually no reason to use the phrase harm reduction when risk reduction gets you to about the same place without the implicit fiction. Here's another reason to care about non-medical contexts. Again, I've disclosed to you that I care because that's the context I came with. I came from Baltimore, having used psychedelic drugs in friend circles, non-medically. San Francisco, the same thing, and entered a room where all people would talk about is medical. So this is RAND data published last year about psychedelic use in the United States in the 12 months prior to whenever they stopped collecting data. It's a 12-month figure. The bars from left to right, the number of people receiving psilocybin in some FDA, DEA-approved context, which now means basically research only, estimated at less than 500. Maybe it's 600, maybe it's 400. I don't care about exact numbers here. LSD, less than 100. Those are the people in the United States who in one recent year got those materials legally, fully legally. If we had state regulated, Oregon and later Colorado, which is state legal while federally illegal, we get bigger numbers. For psilocybin, Again, rough estimates, maybe 6,500 people in a year. They're going up slowly, but on the order of 6,000. LSD, nothing, because these service centers can't dispense LSD. When Rand asked people, using a representative sample, about past drug use, how many people said they took psilocybin in the past year? 11 million. How many people said they took LSD in the last year? 3 million. And just for comparison, the Native American church tradition, where no records are kept, there's no centralization, but it's been estimated that 250,000 to 300,000 people use peyote. We don't know if that's per month, per quarter, per year, per lifetime, but we'll just say 300,000. Look at the dominant thing here, 11 million. There's reason to believe that about half of those are microdoses. If we leave that out for our purposes, that's still over 5 million people in this country took psilocybin in substantial doses in 1 year's time. You can't see it, but on the left, this chart is linear. Sometimes it's useful to look at numbers, the very same data, plotted logarithmically. When you do that, there's only two things left. State-regulated, approximated by 0. FDA-sanctioned, approximated by 0. We still have 11 million, 3 million, and about 300,000. Those make it into visibility on the logarithmic chart. This is a really nice use case. Here's a person, looks very comfortable, at peace, beautiful place, music, in the sun. I hope a couple of things for him. One is he's got at least one good friend nearby who's at ground level. Reading a book, whatever, just watching after him. Make sure if he needs something, it's taken care of. I hope that for him. I hope before he did this, he did some self-screening to make sure he's a good candidate for taking whatever it is he might have taken. Some people are just really ill-advised to take a psychedelic, and they should know who they are. If he were taking the psychedelic to address a serious mental health condition, I would hope that he consulted with a mental health professional before having this day in the park or somebody's backyard, or wherever it is. Go see a trained professional before you do it and after you do it, even if they can't be with you while you do it. I would hope that he's taken a material where he knows the strength of the material. Start small. Know if that particular batch is weak, average, or potent, and only go into the deep water when you choose to go into the deep water. That friend who's nearby, they're your sitter. They're watching after your body so you don't have to. I hope he's agreed with that sitter beforehand. If the sitter tells him not to do something, he has agreed he will not do that thing. Sitter says, nope, put the car keys down, don't drive. Okay, I won't drive. Sitter says, stay away from the edge of the cliff. Okay, I won't go there. Just follow instructions when they are safety related. And the last one, there's this phrase, reverence reduces risk. Now, there's no indication here of how reverent this person is or is not, but there's every reason to believe that if they understand the weight of indigenous use, if they understand the history even of the experimental use in this country throughout the last century, the person will have approached that day with reverence, an understanding that I'm doing something deeply profound, deeply potentially meaningful, not without risk, and I'm doing it for some purpose. Who knows this author? Almost everybody. Who knows this book? Okay, fewer people. There's been a bit of talk in this room about community. And my understanding of the whole of this month here at Edge Esmeralda has a lot to do with moving things into the culture. This is a very slow process. There isn't only one path, and there is not only one destination. This book is the single best thing I've ever read, even though it is a hard book to read, illustrating what a culture would look like that has thoroughly integrated not only the occasional use of a psychedelic, but has built a culture where the daily life implications of those experiences, including non-duality, including connectedness, are deeply woven into every aspect of life. This was Huxley's last book, published shortly before his death. His widow, Laura, said, even though it was not critically highly acclaimed, it was his most important book. And if you want to see his model, it'd be a good, if difficult, read for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Next up, we have Todd Huffman and Dr. Melanie Pina talking about addiction, plasticity, and next generation pharmacology tools. Please come up. All right.